Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you connect with your mind, body, and spirit. This is Charlize, physician and Reiki master, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to remind you that although I'm a physician, the information you receive in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You can find my full disclaimer at my website, www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. If you like what you hear on this podcast, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Check your show notes for more information and for the link to sign up. Thank you. Hello, Art of Healing podcast listeners. Thank you so much for joining me for the month of April. I am honored and just absolutely pleased to have one of my favorite guests and a very dear friend who has agreed to join me to help kick off the month of April with a special podcast episode in which we are going to talk about stress awareness. Listeners, you may or may not know that April is actually Stress Awareness Month, and I think we can all agree that stress levels are higher than we've ever known. So I would like to reintroduce the listeners to Brandi Gibson. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. She's worked in mental health for almost 17 years. She's also a yoga instructor, and she has been practicing yoga for 23 years. Now she is officially licensed for over 4 years. 2 years ago, she became a Reiki master. She combines all of these modalities in her holistic approach to healing. You can find Brandi on Instagram at yogini_Brandi, which is spelled YOGINI_BRANDI. That's on Instagram. And you can also find her on Facebook at Yoga Be Brandi at YOGABYBRANDI. In your show notes, I will make sure to put all of her information in there. Brandi, say hi to the listeners.
Good morning, listeners.
All right. So I figured if we're talking about stress and we are talking about how it impacts us and how it shows up, what better person to ask than someone who is working with human minds and human bodies? And honestly, Brandi, I don't know how you get it all done. I think you and I were kind of chatting about that a few days ago. Like, I don't know how you do so much. But let's start off with a question, if you don't mind. I'd like you to describe, just in your own, however, what is stress? How do you define stress?
Well, I feel like stress to me is something that just completely overwhelms me. Maybe it's something that even robs me of my own peace, my own mental peace. Something that it could come out of nowhere, or maybe I've been anticipating it coming up. Maybe it's a stressful event or a stressful, say, individual. It could be a time period. Let's face it. One of those big stressors is next month. It's tax time, right? And so we business owners feel that crunch, right? Building up, stress can build up over time. Maybe sometimes stress comes out of nowhere. I know for me, I have a tendency to hold my stress in a certain part of my body, which we're kind of going to look at a little bit later in the podcast, talk about how we can release that. For some people, they hold their stress maybe up in their shoulders, maybe it's in their jaw. Other people, it's in their tummies or maybe in their lower hips and lower back. So I think stress is just, it's different for everybody. What may be stressful for me may not be stressful for somebody else, and vice versa. Again, it could be financial stress. It could be relationship stress. It could be work stress. I'm seeing a lot of that in my private practice, as you can imagine, a lot of work stress. And then we have the pandemic stress to go on top of it, which is just a new thing for all of us. I mean, well, not new anymore. We've been in it for 2 years now. But I feel like stress is just, it's individualized. It's whatever we feel we cannot handle at that moment, at that time. And it gives us just that sense of maybe that urge of wanting to run away. You've probably talked about in your podcast about that fight, flight, or freeze syndrome. For me, I'm one of those where I want to avoid or flee. Some people may fight and others may just completely freeze up. And so stress is really individualized depending on our situation, our environment, maybe even our coping skills, our resiliency, how we were raised. Were we raised to handle stress in a positive manner, or were we raised to avoid it and ignore it? Maybe we've been raised that some people are kind of conditioned to be around stress all the time. And gosh, if they don't have that, if things get boring or slow or quiet, then they will almost create it so that they can go back to what they're used to, their norm. So stress is just different for everybody. And we might even look later about how it affects not only the body, but how it affects the mind too.
It was so interesting what you just said. We all hold our stress in different parts of our body. And I was slightly laughing at myself because I have opted into holding the stress in my neck right now. And I kind of laugh because I'm like, well, that was a convenient place to put it. So I can do Reiki on my neck pretty easily during the day. But that's such important information as far as that run, fight, flight, freeze. And we have discussed that on this podcast. We've talked some about the autonomic nervous system. I know you and I have talked about the polyvagal philosophy, but yes, that is so interesting. And particularly, I think I'm fascinated because you work as a counselor, you work with people in, to me, the most intense setting that there can be. And you also work with bodies as well as a yoga instructor. So this is Stress Awareness Month. And although we've all been talking globally about stress, and it's a frequent topic, I know I sense in my own medical practice, in my Reiki practice, that we don't seem to, we're having trouble identifying stress in ourselves, in our body, or in our minds. Can you share some of your wisdom, just like on an individual level, what you think we might be observing that could be from stress?
Sure. I think that so many times I see in my clients in my private practice that they don't even realize they're stressed because it's become their norm. They're so used to it. And then when we get started peeling away the layers and dissecting it, they're like, oh, so I'm not supposed to feel that way? And maybe it's not that we're not supposed to feel it, but maybe we're just discounting it or ignoring it. I think our body is such an intricate system. It's trying to tell us something. And yet we push it away and we're like, no, I'm too busy. I'll go back to that later. And then it makes us really super sick. Maybe the stress does. And then that's when we wind up in the doctor's office, when we've been ignoring some of the signs. Maybe that sign could have been exhaustion, headaches, tummy aches, low back aches. I know for me, again, I hold it in my low back. And I'll even notice it when I'm driving. I noticed the other day when I was driving, I thought, Brandi, release your low back. Let it go. For some reason, I was really tense. Well, I was in Dallas. That's why. Dallas traffic is awful. So trying to get out of the Dallas traffic, I was just like holding it. And my lower back was just aching. And I think for many of us, we just tend to overlook it. We just ignore it and we go on because we're so busy. And so we just assume that it's going to go away, and we don't even realize how it's breaking down our system. It's breaking down our physical body. It's breaking down our mental body, our spiritual body. It's creating these blocks that we just have a tendency to ignore. And if we can start to be aware, that's one of the biggest things I teach in my yoga classes, but also in my private practice, is being body aware. I want you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, notice where you feel some tightness and tension, and see if you can't breathe through it and release it. Now, that's always easier said than done, but if we can start to at least become aware, I think that helps a lot as well, too. I've been practicing yoga for 23 years, and I'm just now starting to do this within like the last year or two, is recognizing, Brandi, where are you feeling it? Why do you have this headache? What brought this on? Asking those questions, because otherwise it just brings on those physical ailments. And then we wind up in a doctor's office, unable to walk, or being sick to our stomach all the time, or headaches and migraines beyond belief. Or maybe even grinding our teeth at night. I know my dentist has told me recently, he's like, you need to start looking at relaxing the jaw, because that's an area I ignore, right? I don't think about that. And I was grinding my teeth at night and not even recognizing it. So then it causes dental issues. So I think that behavioral response is so automatic. Like you said, we just go to that ignoring. I'll deal with that later. I've got other things on my mind I got to take care of now.
So if you don't mind, and for our listeners, they're gonna, you guys are probably doing different things. You might be listening at your desk, or you might be driving, or you might be walking. Brandi, can you walk us through that body awareness practice? Of course, the listeners might be busy, but I think this is a good way, like right now, to practice it. Can you walk us through that one more time?
Sure, absolutely. So maybe just finding yourself in a comfortable seated position, whether it's cross-legged on the floor or on the couch, maybe closing your eyes, or if that's not comfortable, sometimes that's uncomfortable to people, I'll tell them, just glance down at your lap or glance down at the floor. Downcasting the eyes helps release that stress too. So whether those eyes are closed or just downcast. So maybe taking some really big, deep cleansing breaths, breathing in so deeply that we feel like we can't even breathe in anymore, and then very slowly releasing it as if we're blowing out a candle. And I will even tell people sometimes it helps if we will just take the left hand on our heart and take the right hand on our belly. And I do this on purpose because it reminds me as a practitioner, but also as just an individual, a teacher, I need to breathe down past my heart. So many of us do a short, shallow breath when we're stressed out and we're anxious and nervous. And I want you to focus on breathing all the way down to that belly button. So my left hand's on my heart, my right hand's on my belly, and I'm going to breathe all the way past that left hand, past my heart, all the way down to my belly button. And then exhale, send that breath all the way back up through the top of the head. I also tell my practitioners, or my clients, think about that infant lying on its back. As you watch that infant breathe, that whole belly just rises and falls. Whole belly, they use their whole lungs when they're first born. And for whatever reason, we adults, along the way, we've quit breathing like that. We do a short, shallow breath through the chest. And many times it's because we are anxious and nervous. We've got so many things. We're juggling so many different areas in our lives. And so we forget that deep belly breath. We forget those lungs are so big. And we only fill up the top half of the lungs. So going back to that breath again, imagine that breath is coming in through the top of your head. It runs all the way down your spine. It goes past the heart, all the way down past that belly button. And maybe even this time taking it all the way down towards your hips, towards your pubic bone. And then exhale, send it all the way back up again. And then my last visualization as I'm working with people is I will tell them, actually there's two. There's two. One is imagine when you breathe in, you are sending little love notes to your entire body. And when you are exhaling, you're releasing all of that stress, all of that anxiety, all of that irritation, frustration. Now, this time, the last visualization I tell people is imagine that when you breathe in, you are breathing in a white, sparkling, shimmering light, and that whole light just vibrates and fills up the whole body. It raises the vibration, it releases stress, sends those love notes, and then when you exhale, that bright, white, shimmering, silvery, sparkly light exits again, going all the way up through the spine and out through the top of the head. I think sometimes many of us are visual And those visual cues can help us release and relax. Because many times I can tell you to do something, but it may or may not really resonate with you. And I don't know if anybody can hear it in the background, but my dog is snoring currently. So I've just put him to sleep as well.
Brandi, thank you so much. That was stress awareness, mindfulness in real time. And that's what we need. That's actually the place we want to live, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like so many times people come into my office and say, I'm feeling scattered. I can't focus. I can't concentrate. I'm irritable. I'm intense. Well, this to me tells me that, this is stress. And many times we will stress so badly that we do cause that irritation and that lack of focus, and that we just can't focus and concentrate. We can't find the right words. Our brain is scattered. That's when we need to stop, take a break, and do that breath, and maybe even planting those feet into the ground. I tell people all the time, imagine your feet and your legs are the roots to a really strong tree in the Oklahoma winds. Rooting down through those feet, rooting down through those legs, and then just breathing and letting it all go.
For the listeners, Brandi and I are in Oklahoma. There are many listeners that are going to be in other parts of the world. And you may have heard the musical Oklahoma, and there's a line that says, "Wind comes sweeping down the plains." So we laugh at 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Yes.
This is our baseline. We actually like, I went walking yesterday and the winds were like 45 miles an hour. And I thought, what a nice breeze. So much air element. My face is getting blown off and I'm walking. So of course you wear many hats, but your hat as a yoga instructor who's been teaching for years and teaching in all kinds of settings and online and in person and all these settings, and having been one of your students, when you're working with your students, I noticed that you offer like real-time corrections and you're really quite intuitive. When you're working with your students, how is it you're able to see in your yoga students in their bodies during your class?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you perceive or pick up with those folks?
Well, I learned well from another teacher of mine too, but because what I noticed are those body cues, the clenched jaw. That was a big one for me, and I noticed it in others. We hold a lot of tension and tightness in our faces, and we don't even realize it. Sometimes when I work with students or even my clients in my private practice, I will do a little bit of facial yoga just to release that face. We have a lot of nerve endings in the face. And we are all probably really good at having that poker face, right? We put on a poker face, act like everything's fine, and go on about our day. But in reality, we're holding a lot of tension through the jaw, through the eyes. Maybe the mouth is the lips are kind of pursed together. And then maybe the neck and the shoulders. I see a lot of tension and tightness in that as well too. And I tell people all the time, we want to create space between the ears and the shoulders. So we want to really drop the shoulders, let them hang, let them be heavy, and just see if we can't elongate through that neck and really create space between the ears and the neck. Don't let them be BFFs. We don't want them all crunched up next to each other, but just relax. So one of the great things about yoga is you can take it anywhere. You can do it anywhere. If you're sitting on a plane, if you are in your office, if you're on a conference call, wherever it may be, in the grocery store, standing in a long line, you can do yoga that way. Yoga goes with you wherever you go. And so I tell people all the time, yoga means union. We're bringing our mind and our body back together. So many times, and I think I've mentioned this in another podcast, so many of us are so scattered and unfocused that for me, I'm going to use myself as an example. I'll run into things and not realize it. And then I'll have a bruise and I'm like, where did I get that bruise? And I've just walked into a table, right? Because I'm not aware. And so if we can bring the yoga and the mind, or bring the mind and the body back together through yoga, it's that building that bridge, that union. And we're becoming that whole individual, that whole being. And we do that through breath. We do that through the poses. So when I work with my students, my yoga students, I look for those signs of that rigidity, that tension, that tightness. And I tell them, just soften, relax, bring that warmth into the body and just let it melt. Using those words too to help them visualize, oh yeah, I need to melt or I need to soften. Those help with unclenching the jaw. Many times I will tell them, drop the bottom jaw from the top. Let those teeth have some separation. Don't let that top jaw clench and cinch up the bottom jaw. Let that tongue be heavy and let it hang in the bottom of the mouth so that it's not up next to the roof of the mouth. All of those little tiny things that we can do to help release the jaw and release the tension even in the ear. I mean, the ears get sore and tired too. We don't even realize it. So maybe, if it feels good to people in the, the listeners right now, maybe they want to take their fingers and just kind of start to massage that jawline. Start to massage in front of the ear and maybe around the back of the ear. And taking some really big, deep breaths and dropping that bottom jaw from the top jaw as they're doing this little gentle, easy massage. And then maybe inching those fingers up above the eyebrows and around the outside of the eye and the underneath side of the eye, just massaging gently, letting it all go. And then if even that feels good, maybe walking the fingers up into the scalp and just rubbing the scalp gently, just releasing all of that tension and all of that tightness so that maybe we don't create a headache and just prevent that from happening.
I briefly forgot that I was taping a podcast with you because I was massaging my scalp and my jaw. And I sort of floated off there for
Good, it works.
I was like, wait, I'm the host. The teeth grinding, which is also called bruxism, is a fairly common complaint in my medical practice, and probably one of the most awkward interactions because patients will come to me expecting a medical solution. And then I'm coming back to them asking, why are you so stressed? And what can we do about your stress? And it just happens over and over. And so everyone can hear you say now that, that teeth grinding, feel the muscles around your jaw, your TMJ joint. Brandi, you were taking us around there, helping us gently relax the muscles around our TMJs. It's so cool. The scalp massage, that's all of that. So thank you so much, because I bet a lot of us have been, especially with the news and everything that's going on. As much as we want to send our prayers, and well wishes, we as humans, we all carry that pain with us. So thank you so much for sharing that. The teeth grinding, and then you mentioned the shoulders and the neck. And when you first meet, let's just say when you meet a new patient in your practice, what are some of the maybe top 5 signs, symptoms, observations you notice that indicate stress in a new patient for you?
Well, again, I think I look at their body posture, their facial expressions, the tension in their voice, whether they're sitting on the edge of the chair or they're relaxed back into the chair. Maybe they've clenched their fists. Maybe their voice is really raised. They're kind of angry. And, for students within the yoga practice, I think one of the things I also would mention is that when a student gets irritated with their own practice and they're frustrated, many times I feel like there's an outside stressor that's probably brought into the the yoga studio within their mat. And so I always talk to people both in my yoga practice, but also in the private practice for mental health. We talk about boundaries. I think boundaries are really important with stress too. Many times we overlook that too. Are we taking on too much? Are we bringing on stress that maybe isn't even our own? So I think that all of those things combined, their physical body, their spiritual body, how are they relating to others? Are they constantly in turmoil and stress and fighting with each other, or their friends, their family, whoever it may be, yelling at their children, kicking the dog, those sorts of things. I mean, I'm going to look at all of that. Are they engaging in maybe too many drinks at the dinner table with wine or something like that? We're going to look at behaviors. We're going to look at attitudes, belief systems, all of that, and start identifying ways that maybe we could release things. Even if it's small changes, those things over time may snowball into a bigger feeling of relaxation. So we want to make those changes that are hands-on, that are immediate. Again, maybe limiting time with certain people or places or things. Maybe limiting, like you mentioned, exposure to the news. I've learned, for me, I have to just turn it off sometimes. I can't sit and just overwhelm myself with that. So I'm not avoiding or turning a blind eye, but just limiting the amount of time with those stressors. Getting outside, getting out in the environment, walking around. Sometimes I'll take some patients outside and we'll just walk just to get some vitamin D, some sunshine, fresh air, and just talk. So those would be some things that I would be looking for, that, again, those body sensations, and that attitude, that irritation. When they come to me and they say, I'm just irritated all the time. I'm just angry all the time. Well, let's look at that. How much of that is stress that maybe you're taking on from the outside world and making it your own? How can we build a boundary so that maybe you aren't doing so much of that? Those would be some things that I would be looking for.
So you have walked us through some beautiful real-time practices during our time together. I'd like to get some quick tips on how we can kind of yoga everywhere for our stress awareness, if you don't mind. And I'll use myself as an example. Listeners, maybe you can reframe this, in your own life, your own experience. So how could you help me yoga everywhere? For instance, I'm a physician. I'm about to see a patient, and I know that the patient is extremely upset before I walk in the room. I know why. They've got something really bad going on. So I know this is going to be hard, bad. We may be talking about them dying. Before I walk in the room, how can I be aware of my stress so that I can be my best? And for listeners, maybe this will be, you're about to meet with a client, you're about to meet with your boss, that maybe 1 to 2 minutes before you go in, or maybe this meeting is, this is going to be something stressful. So Brandi, can you help us in that 1 to 2 minutes before we go in? How can we be aware of our stress and help ourselves?
Right. Absolutely. So one of the things I notice in my own body is my heart rate really starts to flutter. It really rises when I'm stressed and anxious and nervous. So one of my first steps for myself is, okay, Brandi, stop whatever you're doing. Just wherever you are at, just stop. And if you can, sit down. If not, you can remain standing. But rooting down through those legs again, really becoming aware of where you are at. Maybe closing my eyes, maybe relaxing the shoulders and the jaw, and taking a few big, deep breaths. Really big, deep breaths. That breath carries us. So like I talk about in my yoga classes all the time, don't hold the breath, because that breath carries us through those poses. So if we're going to take yoga wherever we go, whether it's in the line of a restaurant or airport or whatever it may be, stop and breathe. And if we can breathe and make it long, that breath, inhale long and the exhale long, that's going to slow down that autonomic nervous system again. That way we can focus and we can concentrate and we can find those right words that we need. So if it's at your kitchen table or if it's at a friend's house or a really busy restaurant, just stop and breathe. No one has to know what you're doing. You're just breathing. You can close your eyes if you want, or again, downcast, just looking at the floor, looking at your lap, and just breathe. Once you feel secure and more steady, then you can walk into that situation. Then you can walk into that room. I might even say, for me, I will even have a mantra that I say to myself silently. And my mantra, I've stolen, it's not mine. I have to give credit to yoga warriors. It's theirs. And that mantra is, I am steady and strong. And I will say that to myself 3 times. I am steady and strong. I am steady and strong. And just, it's one of those things where you fake it till you make it. You breathe. If you can start doing that each and every time before you walk into that stressful situation, it's going to get easier. It's like creating a habit, doing it for 30 days, creating that habit. I'm going to start something, and it's silly, but I'm going to start a kitchen yoga thing, I think. You can do kitchen at your yoga counter, or yoga at your kitchen counter, and just breathe. While you're making your coffee, taking a forward fold, using your kitchen counter and just breathing. And then coming back up into your standing posture. One of the most basic yoga poses, or asanas, as we call it, is your mountain pose, your Tadasana. Mountain is strong, right? Think about that mountain that's really strong. It has stood the test of time. It has been around for thousands of years. So taking that Tadasana, rooting down through both legs, both feet, evenly. Your weight is evenly distributed on both legs. And you are standing up tall, breathing all the way down to your belly, and then all the way back out. So I think that deep breath, that closing that eyes, rooting down through the legs, and then maybe that mantra of I'm steady and strong. Taking all of those tips and using that before you walk into that situation can be so easy. I say practice it outside of that situation so that it does become second nature. It does become a habit. And then that way you can grasp onto it quickly whenever you need it.
So for myself, on behalf of the listeners, all of us, Brandi, this has been an amazing session, amazing time with you. I actually feel calmer just having walked through this process with you. I feel my own heart rate has actually come down as we've done this like real time yoga everywhere. Brandi, I bet the listeners are going to want to know how to find you. They'll probably want to keep in touch with you, listeners. As always, in the show notes, I'll make sure to put all of her links, but can you share where the listeners can find you?
Sure, absolutely. So on Facebook, it is just Yoga by Brandi. Yoga by, and my first name, Brandi, Brandi. So Yoga by Brandi is on Facebook. And then my Instagram is Yogini, YOGINI _Brandi, BRANDI. So Yogini _Brandi on Instagram.
Brandi, thank you so much once again. Art of Healing listeners, thank you for your time with us today. I hope that listening, you have found for yourself a little bit of yoga everywhere. As always, I love to share. I love for you all to share. So if you've listened to this podcast and you've found this to be helpful, you found some peace, whatever platform you're listening on, you can actually leave a rating of the show. And I would so appreciate if you'd leave me the highest rating you can if you found this was helpful. And as a thank you to you listeners, if you check your show notes, I'm going to send you a freebie that lines up a lot with what Brandi was sharing with us called 9 grounding exercises. So if you want to sign up for that, and I'll shoot that right to your email. Brandi, thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
Oh, thank you. This is wonderful. And Art of Healing listeners, I will talk with you all. We'll connect. Our hearts will connect next week. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Art of Healing podcast. Once again, this is Charlize. You can find out more about me at www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. Did you know I have a blog as well as online courses? Check your show notes to sign up for more information about healing arts, health, and wellness. Thank you. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and loved ones.